We good? Okay. Hey, welcome to Slow News Day live on a Sunday morning. My name is Steve Boykin, and I am here in frigid Boulder Creek, California. I am incredibly happy to be joined this morning by my good friend Jason Carney, and running the tech again this week is the incredibly helpful Joshua Benton. Jason, welcome aboard. How you doing today?
It is Sunday morning. I am not a 49ers fan or a Kansas City fan, and yet my day is now totally engrossed in the unfortunate situation of this year's Super Bowl. How are you?
Man, I completely forgot it was Super Bowl Sunday until yesterday when I found out I'll be taking my son down to the neighbor's house to participate in some sports ball. So I got fired up. I grabbed my favorite football sports ball team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to be as out of place as humanly possible. Switch up and grab my Cubs hat before I go down there.
You should.
You should. Just to show I have faith in a losing team, whichever losing team that may particularly be today. I happen to think that I'm not I have barely watched football since like 2014, 2015.
Right.
But if I had to pick one, I would probably pick the team that has the red and white uniform to win. We okay with that? Is that a solid prediction? Can I go ahead and bank that motherfucker?
You know what? I want to top that. I'm going to pick the team that has the football more. That's what I'm going to pick. That's the team I'm going to pick. I'm going to go ahead and go with that one. I think we're making some very out there bets, and we're going to shock the world when we're right. So, I'm excited.
My dad used to always say that no matter what, it would be the team with the most points at the end of the game that won. Famous for his intuitive observations.
He should have been playing Vegas, man.
Oh man. So anywho, let's get into the thick of things today. Earlier in the week, Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on torture, was interviewed extensively for really the first time since he started this campaign of awareness about the actual ongoing, continuing torture of Julian Assange. If you're not on top of this article already, if you haven't read it yet, I will make sure it gets thrown into the chat and into the description after the show here. Nils Melzer, of course, has been going around pretty regularly and talking with anyone he can about the fact that Julian Assange, held in arbitrary isolation up until very recently, has been and is being and will continue to be tortured. I don't know if you got a chance to glance over the article before we started, but I want to go ahead and right off the bat, the interviewer asks him, why is the Special Rapporteur on torture interested in Julian Assange? And he says, it's something that the German foreign minister asked me, is that really your core mandate? Is Assange a victim of torture? And Melzer just shuts him down immediately. He says, the case falls into my mandate in 3 different ways. First, Assange published proof of systematic torture. But instead of those responsible for the torture, it's Assange who is being persecuted. Second, he himself has been ill-treated to the point that he is now exhibiting symptoms of psychological torture. And third, he's to be extradited to a country that holds people like him in prison conditions that Amnesty International has described as torture. In summary, Assange uncovered torture, has been tortured himself, could be tortured to death in the United States. And a case like that isn't supposed to be a part of my area of responsibility? Fucking brilliant. Beyond that, the case is of a symbolic importance and affects every citizen of a democratic country. Jason, what's your reaction to that?
My reaction is that enhanced interrogation tactics, aka torture, has been a staple of the United States military and the United States penal system. I mean, we are fighting a constant battle in this country to eliminate solitary confinement because, as basic as that is a tool for psychological torture. And Julian's going through far more than that, obviously. If he's degrading in the way that he is in the interviews and how people with firsthand knowledge who've spoken with him have relayed to the public. What's always confused me is that torture in any capacity is more for the sadist that's performing the torture. Information's never accurate. You can't hold it up in the rule or as a part of rule of law. It's not admissible anywhere. And it's at the end of the day, it's more for the sadistic people that are doing the torture. It doesn't have any added value benefit to it. So when it comes to the case of Julian Assange, it's more for revenge by the US government and the UK government for releasing what he released. And essentially all he did was what every journalist was supposed to do. And what this is going to do is try to send out shockwaves to the rest of the media of the world that you, in fact, can be picked up for releasing information, and you could be tortured, and you could be going through this nice little form of hell if you bother to print anything that we don't agree with as the United States. That's all this is here for. It's sadistic, it is vengeful, and it is to basically put Julian Assange's head on a pike for all the world to see. Don't do what this guy did. Uh-oh.
There's very little argument that he's being held up as a warning sign to all journalists, to all publishers, to anyone who would dare wander into the realm of publishing accurate and true information. Because we don't have a media that does that. We have a media that sits at the feet of the national security state, reports whatever it is they want them to report, and then pats themselves on the back for a job well done.
Goebbels would be proud.
Yeah, I think it was either Nader or Chomsky that said any authoritarian regime would marvel at the uniformity of the U.S. media. I want to real quick. I want to scroll back up on the article to the very second question that Melzer is asked, and that's why didn't you take up the case much earlier? Melzer's answer to this should be on flyers and banners and leaflets that just cover entire towns from now until Julian Assange is released from the Guantanamo Bay of England. Why didn't you take up the case much earlier? Melzer says, imagine a dark room. Suddenly someone shines a light on the elephant in the room, on war criminals, on corruption. Assange is the man with the spotlight. The governments are briefly in shock, but then they turn the spotlight around with accusations of rape. It is a classic maneuver when it comes to manipulating public opinion. The elephant once again disappears into the darkness behind the spotlight, and Assange becomes the focus of attention instead, and we start talking about whether Assange is skateboarding in the embassy or whether he's feeding his cat correctly. Suddenly, we all know that he's a rapist, a hacker, a spy, and a narcissist, but the abuses and war crimes he uncovered fade into the darkness. Melzer says, I also lost my focus, despite my professional experience, which should have led me to be more vigilant. So here we have in Nils Melzer, a man who is self-confessing that he himself got caught up into the propaganda, and it made him miss his opportunity earlier on to recognize what was happening and recognize that this man was being tortured. He needed intervention. He needed specifically the UN's Rapporteur on Torture's intervention.
Well, public smearing 101. You throw out a whole bunch of accusations and there's no defense of it. You don't see it in the mainstream media. You don't see it in print. You don't see it anything else, any defenses. In the case of Julian Assange, he came out with the WikiLeaks information dump, however you want to phrase it, and essentially suffered the consequences for it. And they allowed the mainstream media and the governments in the West decided to mount a smear campaign. First, he's a rapist. Then he is a person who violently sexually assaults. And then he's this, and then he's that. Then he's skateboarding. I don't know when that became evil. He was unruly. He was demanding. He was all these things. And not 1 ounce of defense came out when it came to the mainstream. There wasn't another side of the equation for people to discuss and go, okay, well, they say this, but he's also going through this, and then weighing it out themselves. That's a classic smear campaign tactic. And then you have a compliant Western media. It's not just the United States media. It's the UK, it's Germany, it's Sweden. This is basically Western-backed governments with Western media piling on all this nonsense about what's going on, because the United States is the most powerful figure. These countries depend on the United States, and the United States wasn't happy. And this goes back to Obama, in which this information was leaked. The United States armed military did these things. Julian Assange ensured that the world would know without putting any type of smear on it, without putting any type of spin on it. Here's the facts, read, and then go from there. The United States government didn't forgive him then. It hasn't forgiven them since. And now that it has the possibility of having them in their possession, it's a smear campaign. It's CIA 101.
So what I particularly love about this interview is that Nils Melzer walks the interviewer through his progression, Nils's own personal progression of, being sort of caught up by the propaganda, ultimately getting to the point to where he started looking a little bit closer into it and his resultant discoveries. And he allows the interviewer to be as surprised as he was, and then forces the interviewer himself to look at the entire situation from a different angle. It is a masterful approach, and it's also eerily remnant of what intelligence agencies do to smear someone. They will put someone into a camp, and that person will write a bunch of glowing things about them, and then 2, 3, 4 months down the road turn around and say, I thought I knew what was going on, but here's what happened. Melzer takes the same technique and flips it on the interviewer and thus the reader. If you were, look, I realize that I'm not the most credible looking individual when it comes to like detailing fucking psychological abuses on, or maybe I am in that aspect, but nobody specifically, major outlets is calling up Slow News Day for any other reason than to smear me, like the Daily Beast did and like Tim fucking Pool did. Which, by the way, Tim Pool, I'm coming for you, motherfucker. I'm coming for you.
Watch out.
At any rate, Melzer, where did it go? Because I just had it up.
So let me supplement what you're saying very quickly. The key thing that we can point at when it comes to this is the Democrats' absolute love and adoration when the information dump occurred. How much the Democrats loved Julian Assange. I thought it was the greatest thing because this information was damning for the Bush administration. And it was amazing as soon as 2016. That's classic, that short of memories in which they can just be, unless you have Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. This is a part of the smear tactics that the Western powers, if you will, including the Western media, have pushed forth to make Julian Assange the Antichrist.
No, I totally agree. And the way that they did that was through these Swedish rape allegations, which, in fact, as Melzer explains in just devastating detail, were complete and utter farces. If you scroll down, Josh, a little bit to just below the picture that is on screen right meow. Right meow. He starts to break down bit by bit just how farcical the rape allegations were. To truly understand this, I do highly recommend reading the article. When the show's over today, fucking, grab yourself a cup of tea and a bong and sit down and like really go through this. But it turns out that the first accuser had to be found by the Swedish police. This particular woman did not, in fact, come to Swedish authorities and say, Julian Assange did me wrong. She was produced by the Swedish authorities to corroborate charges that they had already filed in order to open an investigation. Throughout the course of the last almost decade, this particular investigation has been dropped, reopened, dropped again, reopened, and finally dropped again, but only after Assange was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy and into the Guantanamo Bay of England. Well, good.
I was going to say, also the UN said that it was essentially harassment and dismissed the Swedish BS. I mean, if you have the UN, a body that can't ever agree on anything, come together and say this is nonsense, that kind of speaks volumes.
The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention was after this a little bit too late, but definitely before the DNC emails were released.
Right.
Sorry, I need a little sip there. We find out in the article that the accuser's testimony was altered, not by her, but by Swedish authorities. That particular woman declined any further testimony, and she went away. There was a second woman who then, the story goes, was a friend of the first woman's, and they were both interested in Julian. The second woman comes forth after the fact, not the same day, had nothing to do with the initial investigation, comes in after the fact and says, oh yeah, by the way, I was a victim of sexual assault too, because in the middle of having sex with Julian, he took the condom off without telling me, but I have the condom, I can produce it. So she produces it, and there's no DNA on it, like at all. Zero, not Julian Assange.
Amazing.
Now, I've heard of like magic condoms, but they usually don't work that way. They're usually magic because somebody's fucking, nosy ass grandmother poked a hole in it, and it ended up producing a kid. And that's what made it this is a truly magic condom in that it eliminates all DNA evidence. Who knew?
Well, let me be unequivocally clear so that no one can misconstrue what we're saying here. Every rape allegation should be thoroughly investigated. We should hear every woman, man, doesn't matter who makes a rape allegation. There should be an investigation. It should be conducted correctly. And then wherever the evidence lies, that's where we need to go. No one here is saying that these women are liars. No one's here saying, we're essentially relaying that the Swedish government and Western powers had more to do with this case than even the two people involved. Let me be abundantly clear.
Yeah, no, look, there's
someone's going to twist that around and turn that into something like we're misogynist pigs. No one is saying that here.
No, I'm reading. Yeah, I'm reading off of this particular article that has source documents from the Swedish police, exchanges from the Swedish police with the Crown Prosecutorial Services. There's a particular screen cap in this article of a message sent from Crown Prosecutorial Services to the Swedish authorities there, saying, "Don't you dare get cold feet."
I wonder why they would get cold feet.
Stefania Marizzi, she's been battling FOIA courts for 5 years just to get this information.
Right.
So huge hat tip and huge thanks to Stefania Marizzi. I hope I am pronouncing her name right, but I am sure I am not, because that's just how that goes. What happened essentially is the Crown Prosecution Service wanted to prevent Sweden from dropping this case at all costs, and that's according to Melzer in the article. Have you ever heard of such tenacity from a foreign government to go after an individual that's being not charged with, but merely investigated for an assault crime?
1936 Germany, and if you happen to be Jewish. Yeah, I've heard of it before. My great uncle died there, so I mean, I get it. I get it. He died in the camp. So yeah, there's been other people who do that, but we usually label them the bad guys.
Entirely true. If we could cut to like the real core of the issue surrounding Julian Assange, because it's incredibly important to take a step back away from the personage of Julian, even though he's a living, breathing human being who deserves to be considered as such by all of us before we make rash judgments. We take a step back away from that and we look at the bigger picture, that this is an assault on journalism. It is an assault on free speech. It sets a massive global legal precedent. The interviewer asks Melzer, he says, a prison sentence of 175 years for investigative journalism, the precedent of the the precedent of the U.S. versus Julian Assange case could set. He asked Melzer, what does it mean when UN member states refuse to provide information to their own special rapporteur on torture? Melzer, without missing a beat, says this is a prearranged affair. A show trial is used to make an example of Julian Assange. This is what we were talking about at the top before we even got into the article. The point is to intimidate other journalists. Intimidation, by the way, is one of the primary purposes for the use of torture around the world. The message to all of us is, this is what will happen to you if you emulate the WikiLeaks model. It is a model that is so dangerous because it is so simple. People who obtain sensitive information from their governments or companies transfer that information to WikiLeaks, but the whistleblower remains anonymous. The reaction shows how great the threat is perceived to be. 4 democratic countries joined forces, the US, Ecuador, Sweden, and the UK, to leverage their power to portray one man as a monster so he could later be burned at the stake without any outcry. This case is a huge scandal and represents the failure of Western rule of law. If Julian Assange is convicted, it will be a death sentence for the freedom of the press. Jason.
That is pretty powerful. And let me throw out essentially what this is. This is essentially Western powers, which is right now on top of the hegemonic keep right now, essentially laying out exactly what you said. If you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. This is I remember back in the 90s, Pravda, I think, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, was mocked for just being a microphone for the state, for Moscow. And they never had an independent thought. They never had an independent deed. They always wrote what the party line was. And this is before communism. So, folks, I'm not throwing this in under USSR. I'm saying the 90s. And we mocked and ridiculed that. But if you turn it on to Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, if you throw it on the Wall Street Journal, if you're reading the New York Times, LA Times, I can go on and on. It's amazing how close each and every one of those articles and segments are in saying the same thing. This is essentially the media acquiescing to authoritarianism. And we're using Julian Assange as the prime example of this is going to happen to you. And what astounds me, what perplexes me, if you will, is when this was the biggest piece of news in 2016, and all of a sudden it disappears, and Assange is allowed to fester and be tortured in some unknown area in the UK by the rest of the world. People obviously in the UK know exactly where this is at, but he's going through this, and there isn't a peep from the mainstream media saying, hey, maybe this isn't right. Maybe Julian Assange and WikiLeaks helped to expose a massive crime, a massive war crime against the people of Iraq. Maybe we should be looking into this a little deeper. Maybe we should be making a louder argument. Maybe we should be taking a tougher stance. No, it's down to independent media, who isn't corporately owned or tied to the United States government or any other government, having to come out with this information and relay it as best as we can. This is the stuff of living nightmares.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we have example after example after example of not just corporate media, which I liken to state television, as you just did with Pravda. That's essentially what corporate media is. It's state television. It's just you've got different formats in which state television operate. And one of them reinforces the fact that there's a red team, and one of them reinforces the fact that there's a blue team. And that reinforcement leads people to become more and more divided and more distrustful of their neighbor. And if you can't trust your neighbor, you're not going to fucking join up and fucking take up arms to defend your agency. Independent media largely dropped the ball on this. There are too many people involved in independent media who have ran with Julian Assange has rape charges, which is categorically false. Too many people have sat by and like mocked and snickered at the smears levied against Julian Assange, like, oh, he doesn't change his cat's litter box, or he's skateboarding in the embassy, or he's unkempt. He's unkempt, Jason. Did you know that UC Global, the Spanish security firm that is now being fucking just hammered by the Spanish court system for completely giving over from the moment 2017 hit and the fucking U.S. puppet Lenin Moreno was installed as president of Ecuador? UC Global, with Moreno's blessing and help as a personal courier to deliver the data that UC Global was providing to the CIA. UC Global took his shaving kit and destroyed his shaving kit starting 3 weeks before his trafficking out of the embassy, so that he would look the way he did when he was dragged out finally. Like, the idea that Julian Assange is unkempt is reinforced by the fact that he was intentionally fucked with, but that is never reported on.
Human beings, my minor's in psychology, so I'm not going to speak like I'm an expert, but I am going to speak like I'm well versed in this. We're a very visual group of creatures. What we see is the first initial impact of something. So if you come out of there looking like you're in a Brooks Brothers suit, your hair slicked back, freshly shaved, we're going to think one thing. But if you come out looking like Julian did after going through that and having his ability to maintain himself destroyed, you're essentially trying to lay out to the public, so nasty, he must be stirred. It's like 101. We are very visual creatures. That's what we saw, and unfortunately, that's what some people have clung on to. Oh, he's what the heck? Oh, okay, yeah, he must be guilty. It's basic.
Well, and that's why they have people with, PhDs in human psychology, behavioral psychology, working at advertising agencies. I mean, it's, manipulation of the public in terms of getting them to buy a product like corporate media is done at a very basic behavioral psychological level. And I don't know if that's like common knowledge or not. I know that I'm saying it like it's common knowledge, but I'm not sure that everybody is aware of the fact that advertising agencies hire PhDs in behavioral science. I think it should
help. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Basically,
I was going to say,
setting myself up to make a different point, but go. Please.
It's to help guide consumers. Yeah, it's just to help guide consumers. Their job is to predict what people want to see, what they're going to want to wear, what they're going to want to eat, and try to curtail it toward making it seem luxurious or things of that nature, like they have to have it. I mean, they've been doing that since, I want to say, the late 60s, I believe, hiring psychiatrists, psychologists, behavioral specialists, things like that, to curtail marketed direct advertising for whatever the hell they were trying to sell to people.
There's a moment towards the end of the Melzer article, and then here, after we discuss this, I'm going to transition to what happened to Zerohedge this week. This whole last week has been just a fucking suck of censorship on Twitter's part, and we're definitely going to dive into that. But towards the end here, the interviewer asks Melzer, what should a constitutional democracy do in such a situation? And that's a good question. I haven't seen that question posed to anyone yet. So hats off to the reporter from Republik for having the temerity to ask this question, having or being shocked enough by Melzer's answers to have his bell rung that hard to be at a point to where he asked this question. Good on him for that. Melzer answers, a constitutional democracy would probably investigate Chelsea Manning for violating official secrecy because she passed video along to Assange, but it certainly wouldn't go after Assange because he published the video in public, consistent with the practices of classic investigative journalism. More than anything, though, a constitutional democracy would investigate and punish the war criminals. These soldiers belong behind bars, but no criminal investigation was launched into a single one of them. Instead, a man who informed the public is locked away in pre-extradition detention in London. And by the way, that's a very important point to make. As of September, I believe, Julian Assange was no longer being held as an individual who had skipped bail. Now, the whole bail skipping thing is 100% bullshit too, because the Brits waited over a week until after he had already been granted asylum by Ecuador for being a politically persecuted individual to issue this warrant. So the warrant itself is false. But anywho, Julian Assange is facing a possible sentence in the U.S. of up to 175 years of prison. Melzer says this is a completely absurd sentence. By comparison, the main war criminals in Yugoslavia tribunal received sentences of 45 years, 175 years in prison in conditions that have been found to be inhumane by the UN Special Rapporteur and by Amnesty International. But the really horrifying thing about this case is the lawlessness that has developed. The powerful can kill without fear of punishment, and journalism is transformed into espionage. It is becoming a crime to tell the truth.
For me, I'm a Marxist. I've been a very public Marxist for several years. I've been saying that fascism is coming. And what you're seeing is a transition from representative democracy in some places, others is parliamentary democracy, into essentially fascism. Donald Trump, and this isn't a bash Trump section, but he's flying in the face of well-established law, and he's flying in the face of common courtesy that the executive branch of the United States has pretty much abided by for the duration of our republic. I like to kind of put him as the face of what's been going on the last 8 to 10 years when it comes to the attacks on journalism. Americans are shocked that he's doing this. Americans are shocked he's doing that. And yet for the last 10 years, we've been having constant I don't even know how to phrase it. It's been so blatantly obvious that what has been eroding of not only trust, but I don't even know how to essentially say that the media can report what we say they can report. And that's it. I mean, be damned if you have a piece of evidence linking the United States to war crimes. Be damned if you have a piece of evidence linking the UK to war crimes. You know, you're screwed if you show up any of the United States or their buddies, governments performing some illegal and nefarious act, and you come out with it, and it's fact. I don't remember WikiLeaks having to retract any WikiLeaks ever retracting anything at all. And the argument isn't whether he's being honest; it's the fact that he reported the truth, as journalism is main tenet, the fourth estate is supposed to do. What was it about light being the best disinfectant? I mean, that's all Julian Assange did. And yet here we are, he's rotting away somewhere being tortured. The United States government, along with its allies, are being allowed to take the fourth estate and drop trow and take a dump all over it. And oddly enough, the media is fine with this. They're going with it. They're okay with being told what they can say and what they can't say. Mike Pence in Indiana, as a governor, was trying to institute a state news where you can get all the facts reported out of the legislature and the executive branch of the state of Indiana.
My home state.
Through them, not through independent press.
Yeah, and by the way, I've said this a couple of times before. This is in no way, shape,
so I mean, at the end of the day, this is.
Oh, sorry, you're breaking up there, and I thought there was a pause, but it was an internet lag. Real quick though, I've said this before. This is not my fault. I was already gone, but my hometown is in the district that made Mike Pence a U.S. representative. The effect,
and this is a bashing.
Right. Go ahead.
No, this is a bashing. I just want people to understand this isn't new. This isn't novel. Nixon tried to do end around the press. You've had Kennedy, you've had Eisenhower, you've had people going all the way back trying to do end arounds, but it's become more successful since the early 90s. And I've noticed that with the access to the first Gulf War, that the media has been acquiescing on certain things. You give us access, we won't say this. If you give us access, we'll report that. It's been interesting watching the press sell its soul just for access, and that's what it seems to be. I think that's why they're taking the party line of the government. And when it comes to Julian Assange, they want access. And the problem is with that access, they're not able to report independently when Trump is doing something, or the next president, or this representative, or whatever. They're going to be told what to print, how to print it, and what way to print it. And they're going to do it just for access.
Katie Halper earlier this week tweeted out, can somebody explain Tom Watson to me? Because Tom Watson was just out there fucking doing what Tom does, just trying to make sure that all of the boots are lined up for him to lick, and all of the NatSec state members are, as bent over as possible so he can slide right up in there and tongue their assholes. I responded to this and I said, Tom Watson is what happens when access journalism and institutional security combine to form an organic shoeshine chair. And I feel that's a fairly accurate description. I do, but the same could be said for Max Boot. The same could be said for Chris Hayes, my old boss. The same could be said for Rachel Maddow. You were talking earlier about nary a peep from state television when Julian Assange was trafficked out, other than snickering. There was a moment when the Trump administration and Bill Barr's Department of Justice issued their 18 bullshit charges against Julian Assange, where state television kind of perked their ears up and was like, holy shit, this might apply to me. And in their reporting on this, they all had to say what the Trump administration is doing is bad, but the character of Julian Assange is what we're going to spend the next 8 minutes of this segment focused on, so that we can smear his character so that you all hate him, but understand that Trump bad. Trump bad, Assange bad, we're good. Rachel Maddow can't even bring herself to say Julian Assange's name. She is very much alike Bernie Sanders in this aspect. But Maddow sneers out the WikiLeaks guy, like as she's talking about Julian Assange. And I don't advocate violence, but man, like if I have to sit through that one more time, it's going to make me want to go down to the wharf, drop a line, get me a mackerel, throw it in an icebox, drive to New York, and mackerel slap the fuck out of Rachel Maddow. Like, so goddamn frustrating.
This is how you have to think of it. Chris Matthews is the Bill O'Reilly of MSNBC, of centrist. Rachel Maddow is the Sean Hannity of centrist of MSNBC. All their characters are to do is to stump for their particular interest, and their interest only. Facts be damned. And the fact that they make the money that they make is comparable to Bill O'Reilly before he left Fox, and to Sean Hannity. I mean, you've got these people that are there as personalities, not because they're good at their job, because they were great journalists that led them to this. It's only because they're personalities and how fired up they can get people. Russiagate. I mean, I don't think I ever heard someone use the term Russia, even throughout the whole of the existence of the Soviet Union, for 70 years, more than Rachel Maddow did from 2017 to 2019. There was a narrative there. She was trying to sell a narrative. She's trying to push a narrative, and she's effective at pushing a narrative. She is, again, I would equate her to the Sean Hannity of the center.
No, I agree with that assessment 100%. While we're on the subject of the failure of state television and the vital need for good independent outlets, the website Zerohedge is a libertarian,
keep going,
at best, but certainly more often than not directly partisan website based out of Wall Street. Or he's the renegade Wall Street hedge fund guy. This week we saw Twitter just swinging around its fucking censor dick all over the place. Zerohedge becoming one of the ultimate casualties of this. To kick off the week, Twitter started censoring parody accounts and satire accounts that were clearly labeled parody. Those accounts got suspended. I think I saw MSDNC back up yesterday, so they might have won their... Okay, he created an alt.
Yeah.
Man, it's so nice to have Josh here on tech and to be able to get to me. So it actually,
he's your Ron Placone.
Thank you, Josh, for being here. I know the audience can't hear you, but I can, and I appreciate you. So Twitter censors satire. Satire is now unacceptable speech. The very next day, and I did cover this a little bit on Thursday when Taylor Hudak was on the show to talk about her experience at the National Press Club, which, by the way, she's now got videos of that up on the Action for Assange website. And during the course of the day or halftime or whatever, please go check those out. She was able to get interviews with not only Julian Assange's lawyer, but Edward Snowden's lawyer as well. And I look forward to being able to dive into those clips. We discussed Elizabeth Warren's online disinformation plan. Have you had a chance to look at this, Jay, at all?
I think I've been arguing for it most of the last couple of weeks. I've been arguing and pointing out the flaws of the disinformation. I mean, you've been watching my Twitter. I try to break down each and every point to be like, no. But no, have I gone over any press or anything covering it? No, I've just been seeing it live in the flesh and raging.
Well, Elizabeth Warren has a plan.
Oh, she has a wait.
She has a plan.
She has a plan.
Like I'm not gonna bother with bringing up the screenshots or anything right now. But her plan is Orwellian as fuck. Like starts getting into it, the very first sentence is talking about more cooperation with tech companies and government to be able to stifle what is essentially accurate reporting from outside of the narrative. She talks about giving police the power to determine what is right and what is wrong in terms of the written word. Like the fucking police are trained for that. Like they are. So this is released, a day after Twitter decides satire is weaponized now. The very next day, Twitter releases an option that you can now mass report people for posting political misinformation. Mm-hmm. This all seems to be very, if not ultimately coordinated, ridiculously coincidental. The day after that, Zerohedge, again, like ostensibly libertarian, renegade Wall Street hedge fund blog, becomes suspended from Twitter. Now, they were suspended. Well, I'll go to the article there and use their own words, except for I just hit a wrong button and now I'm on fucking eBay. There we go.
Well, let me dive in because I love this subject. I'm a huge fan of this subject. I talk a lot about this subject.
Hey, we've got the article up. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Oh no, go ahead. Jump into the article and then we can have her back and forth.
Okay. Just Zerohedge leads with, first it was Facebook, then all of New Zealand. Now Twitter has decided to suspend Zerohedge, just as in the prior bans, which were eventually overturned. So in this case, it is unclear what prompted Twitter's abrupt censorship. The only notification we received from Twitter was the following: your account Zerohedge has been suspended for violating Twitter rules, specifically for violating our rules against abuse and harassment. Now, Twitter is ultimately complaining that Zerohedge doxed a Chinese scientist in their reporting and in their tweets online. What they did in reality is they went to the lab in Wuhan where this viral outbreak happened. This is all related to reporting on the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. I talked last week with Pasta, Craig Pasta Jardula. He was on the show. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that conversation. I started to put a bug in his ear that this particular virus might be a little bit more sinister than we first thought. Now, Zerohedge had the same idea. Zerohedge did some serious reporting on it. And what they came to find out in their reporting is what ultimately got them suspended. I'm going to go ahead and transition to that article, but let's discuss the suspension here, Jay, and then we'll go into the article.
Let me be the academic elitist that you know me to be for a second. Let me put that hat on. When I speak on this, know that I speak with authority of education, of understanding, of participating in activism, participating in journalism. I just don't want at all there to be a misconstruing of what I'm trying to say here. I have spent 5 years trying to educate people that there's a difference between a Democrat and a socialist. I don't believe anybody on Twitter outside of maybe those in academia can successfully call something fact or fiction based off their feelings. Now, are there things that are so overtly false that you can say, okay, we'll report that? Sure. But does it ever come in that nice little package of obviousness? No. So if I have a dissenting argument as a well-educated BA holder of political science with a concentration in international relations and a minor in psychology, and I point out the Venezuelan situation, which my position is very much anti-U.S. government line. So I point out with facts, figures about the points I'm trying to make, and I'm able to lay it out in a way that's irrefutable. All of a sudden, you're allowed as an uneducated mass to point it out and say that I'm creating fake news, that I'm lying, that this is false. I have a serious problem with Twitter on that particular subject. Facebook, I've walked away from because of the constant censorship that I've been suffering for 5 years with it. And now to see Twitter going down this road, who are the people that could possibly freaking tell me that I'm somehow peddling lies when I lay out facts and citations for all to see? That irritates the shit out of me because I had to put myself through school and go through this stuff so that I can gain the knowledge, the research capabilities, the understanding of our government and ideologies and sociology, psychology, etc., so I can make these statements with some authority. And I have some moron who works at Macy's telling me I'm wrong. No. I'm not okay with that.
First off, there's still Macy's.
Yeah.
Wow. And secondly, like, thank you for flexing your pedigree there, because I know it's no, dude. Like it's what puts the icing on the cake of your reporting and your writing. You're not, just some fucking carpenter schmuck who has a laptop and a camera.
Let me be frank. Everybody deserves a voice. It's when you're able to judge others people's and limit their ability to speak that you can't just be some schmuck. Everybody deserves the right to speak, but if you're able to point it out with some authority that this is false or this is fake, investigate it from there, but not because 65 people on a Democratic page said you were mean to Hillary Clinton, ergo it's false. That bothers me.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. I want to dig into the article that got Zerohedge suspended, because again, they had done a lot of reporting on the coronavirus. They had an article up at the beginning of the week that basically laid out the theory that may be reality, certainly much more believable than what the Chinese government was saying at the time, that the coronavirus itself was man-made or man-modified. So the article kicks off in light of growing speculation, most of it within less than official circles, the official theory for the spread of the coronavirus epidemic, namely because someone ate a bat soup at a Wuhan seafood and animal market, is a fabricated farce, and that a real reason behind the viral spread is because a weaponized version of the coronavirus, one which may have originally been obtained from Canada, was released by Wuhan+Institute+Virology, accidentally or not, to a top-level 4 biohazard lab that was studying the world's most dangerous pathogens. That's according to the own lab. That's the lab's own website saying this is what we do. We study the world's most dangerous pathogens. Perhaps it would be a good idea for the same Wuhan+Institute+Virology to remove the following help wanted notice posted on November 18, 2019, according to which the Institute is seeking to hire 1 or 2 postdoc fellows who will use, this is a quote from their now hiring ad, use bats to research the molecular mechanism that allows Ebola and SARS-associated coronaviruses to lie dormant for a long time without causing diseases. The right candidate will have obtained or is about to obtain a PhD in life science and biomedical related fields, have a reliable and rigorous work style, a strong independent scientific research ability and teamwork spirit, have a strong English communication and writing skills, have research papers published in international mainstream academic journals, have cell biology, immunology, genomics, and other relevant background. Experience is preferred. The posting is still up. I can't read Mandarin, but it was Google translated. Thank you, Zerohedge, for doing that. Why is this notable? Because as it turns out, there's a job posting for the lab of Dr. Ping Zhao, PhD, a researcher at the Wuhan+Institute+Virology, and leader of the bat virus infection and immunization group. Am I crazy for suggesting to pasta with the couple of articles that I had on the time, one from Business Insider saying that the Gates Foundation had 20% of the stock owned in a manipulated coronavirus? Am I crazy for suggesting that? Is Zerohedge crazy for doing the deep dives that they have and have formulated a reporting that counters the narrative? Does Zerohedge deserve to be suspended?
Let me come in from Nerdland real quick. When I was a kid, the Ebola Reston virus, which is one of the main three Ebola viruses, you have Ebola Zaire, Ebola Sudan, and Ebola Reston, Virginia. Luckily, it was only through simians that Reston occurred, but it got me interested in virology, getting into Marburg, getting into hemorrhagic fever, things like that. And what Zerohedge lays out would be the perfect conduit. They're looking at bats because bats have the ability to carry these viruses without showing any effects of them, dying, etc. It would be perfect for a sleeper cell, a group of people to have it activated at some point, sitting around in their system, and to have it activated, or even coughing, sneezing, whatever. They could carry it and never show signs of the disease and spread it to people. It's weaponizing at its ugliest. So are you crazy or Zerohedge? No. Zerohedge is doing a deep dive and asking the questions. That's what journalism is supposed to do. Now, if it kind of pans out that those questions are silly or factual, that's up for the public to push for. All Zerohedge did was their job. Do they deserve to be banned? Not at all. Because I believe it was for doxing was the accusation against Zerohedge. I was doxing this doctor. No. It's public knowledge already when it came to the job application. And
so let's discuss this for a minute, because what they did, okay, they tweeted out this particular doctor's information from the Wuhan+Institute+Virology website. It contained his work email and his phone number. Is that doxing?
No. Doxing to me is what I saw early on in 2017, where people would have their private home address, private home number, basically things that aren't meant for public consumption. That's doxing to me. Not when you can look it up at the University of California website and be like, oh, I need to know Dr. such and such. Boom, boom, boom. It's already public information. How is that doxing?
Right. No, that was my point. And when I was arguing that point in one of Caitlin Johnstone's threads, the one person that kept coming back to me was like, but it's posted on Twitter. Twitter says you can't post, this particular information. This particular information is publicly available. This particular information is not his address. It's not, I don't even know if that's his personal phone number. I know that if you're a high up muckety muck in a level 4 bioweapons fucking facility, you have a couple different phones. There are a couple, like one is your family phone where, your friends and your, relatives and whatever can get a hold of you. And one is your work phone. And you don't give out that number to your friends, your relatives, whatever. So it is a very generous interpretation of Twitter's own rules to consider this information, this tweet, doxing.
The fun part about legalese is that you have to be very specific. And if Twitter said that you cannot put a name, address, phone number, or anything else, then that person would have a 100% to fact to say that. He would be right to say, he or she would be right to say that. But I've never seen anything about that. Doxing is the release of private information so that someone can it's targeted harassment. That's what it is. It's a form of intimidation. It's a lot of different things. But when it's publicly available, you're not digging through any illegal methods of getting someone's number, where they work, what their email addresses are. You're looking up on the website of their own corporation, their own university, their own whatever, to get that information. No, it's not doxing. And anybody who has an interpretation of that literally doesn't understand what doxing is.
I mean, I agree with that. I do. That's a fair interpretation.
I thought so.
So going back to the article for a minute, after Zerohedge sets up this particular doctor's background and whatnot, they say, this is what brings us to the punchline. Courtesy of the Wuhan+Institute+Virology, here's a press release from Dr. Zhou's lab titled, "How Bats Carry Viruses Without Getting Sick." I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm just going to read the highlighted part in a paper published in the journal Cell Host and Microbe, which sounds like something I got to get. On February 22nd, scientists at the Wuhan+Institute+Virology in China find that in bats, an antiviral immune pathway called the sting interferon pathway is dampened, and bats can maintain just enough defense against illnesses without triggering a heightened immune reaction. The authors hypothesize that this defense strategy evolved as part of three interconnected features of bat biology. They are flying mammals, have a long lifespan, and host a large viral reservoir. Zerohedge lays out in just bold detail the fact that this particular doctor at this particular lab had been 4 years studying how you could put a coronavirus in a bat and have it develop relative immunity to it so that it could spread in a way that would become weaponized.
Well, here's also the thing too, is who says this isn't just a practice run? Because right now, last I checked, it has a 3% mortality rate. That's nothing to write home to mom about compared to Spanish influenza, Ebola, hemorrhagic fever, even malaria, I believe, has a higher mortality rate. What if this is a practice run just to see what if? Now I'm throwing out there speculation.
Funny you mention that, and I'll let you finish your point, but it's really funny you mentioned that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's pretty much the summation of my point. I'm not throwing, I read the article. I'm reserving judgment until I learn more. But I mean, who's to say this isn't a practice run?
3 weeks before we found out about this virus, there was a company that, again, Bill Gates is a part of, that ran a simulation asking what would happen if a SARS-type coronavirus was released onto the public. And in that scenario, the result was 65 million deaths. Now, even if it contained to China, that's still a relatively small percentage of the overall global population, but it is enough to make China built like 10 hospitals in a couple of days. It's enough for Trump to declare an emergency. Fear of viral infection is one of the types of population control.
Yeah.
That is weaponized against us as just, general living, breathing, thinking humans that are in a country that is more and more driven by fear of some sort or another. That's something that people are going to react
to. And I would like to throw something out as a sidebar. Stop wearing the surgical masks unless you're carrying the disease and you're trying to prevent others from getting it. It is absolutely pointless and useless. Our geography is set up in this country so that we're pretty far apart I mean, even in major cities, you have different neighborhoods and regions where things could spread quickly. But if you go out to the rural areas, such as Santa Cruz, such as Modesto, Madera, other places around just California alone, it's going to take a while for things to. So don't panic. Don't be wearing goofy ass friggin' masks. Don't be just freaking out just yet. Pay attention to it, and pay attention to where things are going, and try to get answers. It's this is insanity because people are already starting to have a pandemic panic, and I don't think we're quite there yet.
Well, fear porn is America's most highly consumed variety of porn. Like straight up. That's all there is to it. I'd like to conclude our discussion on Zerohedge by going over their summary of what happened with this, because it's really directly related to what we're talking about. To wrap their article, they say, so to summarize, one of China's top virology and immunology experts was and still works at China's top-rated biohazard lab, the Wuhan+Institute+Virology, which some have affectionately called the real umbrella corporation. Since 2009, Ping has been leading Chinese scientists researching the immune mechanism of bats carrying and transmitting lethal viruses in the world. His primary field of study is researching how and why bats can be infected with some of the most nightmarish viruses in the world, including Ebola, SARS, and coronaviruses, and not get sick. He was genetically engineering various immune pathways, such as the sting pathway in bats, to make bats more or less susceptible to an infection, in the process potentially creating a highly resistant mutant superbug. As part of his studies, Ping also researched mutant coronavirus strains that overcame the natural immunity of some bats. These are superbug coronavirus strains, which are not resistant to any natural immune pathway and now appear to be out in the wild. As of mid-November, his lab was actively hiring inexperienced postdocs to help conduct his research into super coronaviruses and bat infections, and Ping's work on virology and bat immunology has received support from the National Yu King Fund, the pilot project of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and a major project of the Ministry of Science and Technology. One thing tells us, anyone wants to find out what really caused a coronavirus pandemic that has infected thousands of people in China and across the globe, they should probably pay Dr. Ping a visit.
I don't disagree. And I'm kind of curious. We talk about a war for natural resources. We talk about strife occurring because resources are dwindling. What are the two most effective ways to end any type of resource issue? World War.
Oh, yeah, war and plague.
That's how you kill the maximum amount of people needed to reset things. This is what capitalism brings you, for the record. I just want to throw it out there. I had to throw in my Marxist term of the day. But it's questionable if we're trying to find ways to mask. Now, if this was just something where they were experimenting on coronavirus and it broke out, okay, that's one thing. But to try to use it, to use bat, sting interferons, to mask having it. Basically, you're able to live with it inside yourself and spread it to others. That's what makes me question the weaponizing component.
Well, bat is a food source in China.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to, originally they said it was because somebody ate snake.
Snake, yeah, I remember snakes was a big thing.
That was the original, conclusion that the Chinese had announced and that the U.S. media picked up unquestioningly.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have a hand-in-glove relationship with China. We are prepping for and have been in a Cold War with China, specifically in Africa, and have been going into
South America as well.
Panic about their One Belt, One Road policy that they're trying to. But this, for whatever reason, was reported on as gospel truth, and has driven the conversation about the coronavirus, has amplified the fear porn, has people in fucking, podunk fucking Nebraska walking around with fucking paper face masks, like do anything. This is so Karen in the chat says something about has to do with Agenda 21. They already kind of implemented that. There's a new UN. It's like Agenda 234. I think I'll have to go back to that. But yeah, I mean, for decades now, we've had people running simulations about what would happen if there was a massive viral outbreak and how that would work. We had one guy on TV say it's good for the economy.
Well, let me be 100%, and I'm not advocating, but these models that they do, these game theories that they essentially run, it's helpful to understand potentially what could happen if a pandemic of this magnitude or of that magnitude or a war of this magnitude happen. It's good to have that knowledge to play it out. I think it's very easy.
Okay, yeah, you were kind of breaking up there for a minute. I promise you guys that are in the chat right now and that will be watching later, I promise you that I will stay on top of this story as best as possible and let you know what's going on. That's funny. Timbuktu in the set. We were talking about the ate snake. Timbuktu in the chat was like, "Who ate Liz Warren?" That's good shit, Tim. Thanks. I appreciate that.
We need some levity because that was fucking depressing.
Yeah, it was pretty. I've got a little bit of levity on the psychedelic legalization front.
Santa Cruz,
the town that is right down the road from me, down the mountain. Santa Cruz has become the third U.S. city to decriminalize psilocybin plant medicine as advocacy expands. Now, this article is out of Forbes magazine, and I don't normally use MSM outlets for my baseline content. I would have preferred to use my own hometown paper, the Santa Cruz Sentinel, but they're behind a fucking paywall. And it's a shit paper. Like, it's a shit paper behind a paywall. Fuck those guys. A recent resolution by Santa Cruz City Council has made the municipality the third in the U.S. to decriminalize psychedelic mushrooms. Congratulations, Santa Cruz! The unanimous ruling makes the personal possession and use of so-called entheogenic plants and fungi, including ayahuasca, ibogaine, and magic mushrooms, a low priority for law enforcement. The ruling follows two other major American U.S. cities establishing similar resolutions last year, with Oakland decriminalizing a wide array of entheogens, and Denver, shout out to Denver and shout out to specifically the Denver Free Assange group. Kimber, if you're around, you kick ass. The ruling did that, decriminalizing the possession and use of specifically magic mushrooms containing psilocybin, signaling the first significant steps toward a much wider mainstream acceptance of psychedelic assisted therapy in America. These plant medicines, some used traditionally in ancient cultures for thousands of years, will be more readily available to people in need of emotional support. What you gotta say there, Jay?
This is something I actually wrote a paper on a couple of years ago, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit. Okay, it's been shown,
because I gotta run here for a minute, so go into.
Okay, we got to wrap at about 10 anyways. Or for my end, basically, it's a beautiful thing because they've been doing these studies for the longest time that showed to help PTSD. It's helped to assist in depression, with no major side effects. Like, you're going to go with some depression drugs and some of their assistant drugs. It has a tendency to create suicidal ideation. It has a tendency to throw moods off very violently and radically. With the psychedelics that they've used, it's shown to have helped assist those with depression have much more positive results. PTSD is a big one, especially with the war in Afghanistan, war in Iraq, and a lot of soldiers coming home people who are victims of violent crimes, people who have witnessed things that have created PTSD. These drugs could help a lot more and have a lot less negative side effects than anything that's coming out of big pharma. I'm not one of those people who are like, we need to get all natural. I've never been that guy. But the studies after study after study shows that these drugs help people who are suffering from clinical depression, other forms of depression, and PTSD. So there's that. It's one of those things where I think that at the end of the day, Santa Cruz, Oakland, and Denver are very forward thinking when it comes to these drugs. It's the argument you're going to hear from those in the pharmaceutical wing and the older crowd is that, how is this supposed to help? How is this supposed to assist? How is this supposed to do anything other than get you high? Well, it's not the point. Study after study has shown that these drugs help, and they help in a way that you can't quite have in any other therapy. And I'm excited about it. Just be ready for people to try to shoot it down and then laugh mockingly in their face as you provide studies that whatever they're saying isn't fact-based.
We're fortunate here in Santa Cruz, at least, and it surprises me a little bit that we're the third city and not the first to decriminalize psychedelics, because MAPS is located here. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. It is either co-founded by or on the board sits Zach Leary, Timothy Leary's kid.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on, I gotta address. There we go. They know better than to come out here when I'm doing this. Fucking children, man. Anywho, this particular city council here in Santa Cruz that did this decriminalization. I have had our mayor on Slow News Day before. He was a guy named Justin Cummings. It was good talk. I hope to have him back. Although now that he's super busy, it will probably be difficult. But at the time, he was just running for a spot on city council. And it was before the vote count had been finalized. So in the intervening time, yes, he got a spot on city council. They made him vice mayor right away. At about less than 6 months later, they made him mayor. Our city council down in Santa Cruz is entirely no party preference. There is not a registered Republican or Democrat on that city council. It's one of the few in the country. And while we are still ultimately governed and ruled by developers, some of the steps that they have been taking make me feel, positive, a little bit better about what we have going on in the Cruz. Yeah, I got to get that guy back on the show. According to the measure that they passed, cultivation is part of this. You can now grow psilocybin mushrooms in your home. So guess what? A big part of me wants to go ahead and do that and put it on as a series so other people can learn how to grow mushrooms in their house. Do have a friend who is interested in starting cultivation on his own. He went and attended a couple of classes in Santa Cruz the other week. So maybe I'll just talk to him and see if we can't use his op as part of the series. But I think that would be fun.
Well, that's the thing. Like I said, study after study shows, as a person who suffered from clinical depression, as a person who has anxiety disorder and other issues, I'm a bag of fun. Anything that could help eliminate the side effects and promote small victories in the battle with depression and other mental health issues, it's huge. And I'm not the guy. I've never done shrooms in my life. I've never had a particular interest to do so. I'm not for it. I'm not against it. But at the end of the day, the studies don't lie. The studies show that they help those with PTSD and suffer depression with a lot less side effects of common pharmacological products that are being pushed through our magazines, TV ads, and everything else every day. I'm all for whatever helps with a minimum amount of side effects. And this is one of them.
And for the last several years now, I'm going to go back to MAPS and give them another shout out for doing this, because they were conducting the initial studies on psilocybin as medicine for PTSD, a number of other things. They currently just published a study about MDMA and PTSD with veterans. There's an organization called Project New Day that was I just put this in the chat too, but very instrumental in spending time with and educating the city council on psilocybin as medicine. So big shout out to Project New Day. I know that you got a split here soon.
Yeah.
I'm going to open up the chat for any kind of questions that you may have. Tony watches closely. What are the dangers of mushrooms? Shattering open your third eye and realizing that everything that you've been told by most of the adults in your life is bullshit. That's a danger of mushrooms, certainly. Taking too many and injuring yourself is certainly a danger of mushrooms. It's poison that grows on shit. You know?
But generally it's supervised by a therapist. I mean, this isn't like, take these and call me in the morning, go trip out on your own. This is being guided by a therapist.
That's how I did it. Man, when I briefly attended Purdue University, and I had a theater teacher there who was a very tall woman. She had a very long neck and she had red curly hair. And I woke up one morning and I decided, fuck it, dude. I'm going to be higher than a Georgia pine all day long. And Terrence McKenna called a heroic dose of mushroom 5.5 dried grams, right? That was a heroic dose, slightly less than a quarter of mushrooms. I went over that a little bit. I had
just
about,
I
had about not a half ounce, but not a quarter. Like, it was probably like 9.5 grams or something that I woke up, ate a couple, washed it down with some orange juice. And then, like, for one of the first times and only times in my entire very short university career, I went down to the cafeteria and I got me a bowl of Lucky Charms, and I fucking just poured the rest of the bag of shrooms in the bowl of cereal, and I ate them. And then I went to class.
Oh, God.
And class was about an hour later, right? Straight the fuck up, I watched my theater teacher turn into a cartoon giraffe.
That was coming.
All right. She was already tall. She already had the long neck. She already had the curly. Yeah, there was a particular like series of cartoons like way back in the day that had a couple of giraffes on it, and the lady.
That is awesome.
All right. So this theater teacher lady giraffes out on me. She's still at the board. She's still talking. And then, like, after a while, I noticed that it's absolutely silent in the class, and the giraffe is looking at me, and the giraffe is talking to me, right? Like, I just got asked a question, and I'm supposed to answer it. So I give the best of my ability, and I come out with... So I'm like, fuck it, I'm out of here. This is a little bit too much. I get up and I walk outside, and like right in front of the door, and there are some windows here, I pull out a cigarette pack and I pull out a joint. Now I'm in West Lafayette, Indiana in 1996. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Weed's not legal now. In the 90s, it was like, we're going to send 8 cops to kick in your door, if we think you may be partaking, not selling, but simply partaking. This is a fucking fatty too, man. Like, it was obviously not a cigarette. I had, as a good psychonaut, I had pre-planned for my day and rolled several joints before I left for the cafeteria.
Attaboy.
One of them. This was one of them, and I'm sitting like I'm right in front of the fucking door. Like, trying to fucking relax myself because I just saw a goddamn giraffe.
Cartoon giraffe of all things.
A cartoon giraffe. So that is definitely, like, I don't know if I would consider that a danger, Tony, of psychedelics, but it's certainly a possibility. Now, there is a question for you in the chat, Jade. Do you have any data on joint calcification due to use? Is that due to use, Cat, of mushrooms?
Offhand, I don't, but I can point you in the right direction. JAMA, the Journal for American Medical Association, you have several different outlets. If you have access to LexisNexis, and I know not everybody does, psilocybin studies would be a good one that'll cross-reference and get you every piece of information that you'll ever need. But that's off LexisNexis. If you use Google Scholar and plug that in, you should have an easy time of getting the paperwork and what have you. But offhand, this is from studies. I think I did a paper like 3 years ago on it, and I've been an advocate for PTSD and depression ever since, being a former vet and being a person who suffers from depression. Huge fan from what the studies have shown.
I honestly, like, I don't experience, I microdosed and I've macrodosed, and I have not necessarily experienced like severe joint pain. What I would attribute a lot of that to is dehydration while you're in the middle of a really good trip.
Hydrate.
Yeah. And that would probably, that'll leave you sore in the morning. Overextending yourself while you're high as a kite. A lot of people find that they have abundant energy in the moment. You're probably gonna do some shit that wears you out. I don't know if there's a direct correlation between achy joints or bones or even calcification, but I'll look into that a little bit too. I will. Jay, I know you got to run. The rest of you guys stick around. I'm going to hang out for about another half an hour, and we will turn that into an AMA. So any questions you have, throw them at me. Jay, please give the good folks your final thoughts and let them know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Paramquern. You can find me all over the place when it comes. Just type in Jason Carney articles. You're not going to find me on the New York Times, thankfully, but you'll find me there. And also, if you have any questions for me, direct them through Steve. Steve will get them to me, and I will get you an answer PDQ. I have some engagements to go to, so fortunately, I won't be able to hang around for the half hour, but it's always a blast coming on here, and this is the best crowd, the best audience I could possibly ask for.
Thank you, Jay. And I really do. I am amazed at how knowledgeable and how like how much they get along. Like, I get a great chat here. Like, nobody's really fucking attacking each other. No, just rash of fucking spam posts. I'm really, really fortunate to have such a killer audience.
You do.
Yeah. So once again, thank you, Jay. I did put your Twitter handle in the chat. And keep at it. And I look forward to seeing what you put out here in the upcoming months. Yeah, congratulations on that too, by the way.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. You guys be safe.
All right, brother. You too. Enjoy your engagements.
Always.
Go sports ball. Jason Carney, everybody. I do always enjoy it when Jay's on the show. We get a lot of good talking in, and I managed to spend like an hour and a half with ostensibly a Bernie Sanders surrogate who did not mention Bernard Jesus Sanders. So I'm extra stoked that we didn't have to devolve into horse race, and we got some good talk in there. Tony, watch this closely. You couldn't finish on acid. I conceived a kid on acid. While trying to watch Pan's Labyrinth, right? Like, yeah, we. I know you can't. I know you can't hear Josh in the chat, but Josh is saying that he too conceived a child on the LSD, but instead of Pan's Labyrinth, it was Talladega Nights. Yo, man, that gives a whole new spin on if you ain't first, you're last. That's good shit. That's good shit. If I don't see any questions in the chat, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up because we do have some shit to do today. So I would like to thank Jason Carney one more time. I would like to thank Josh for running the tech today. Josh, you did a tremendous job, and I am incredibly appreciative of your efforts. Josh is doing this all volunteer. He's helping out with the Action for Assange vigils. Huge Action for Assange vigil this upcoming Wednesday. We are going to have a special guest that I cannot name yet, but I am so very looking forward to that. And we will also be joined by independent journalist and all-around badass Eva Bartlett. Man, is that going to be awesome. We're very much looking forward to that. So please, if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to Action for Assange on YouTube. Follow action_4 Assange on Twitter. Check out the clips. Check out the previous vigils. We have had some incredible humans on that show. Last week we had motherfucking Commander X, like the Commander X Anon, who is now currently living in Mexico, having received asylum there. Homeboy showed up by candlelight, like it was great. So we raised a particular flag for information activism, and I'm very, very stoked. I guess somebody in the chat asking if I have ever considered stand-up because of the mushroom story. I've done stand-up before. I would actually like to do it again. I don't know how I can fit that into my schedule with having several children's and a day job and the vigils and this show, but I would like to. I would, straight up. Yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the day. Thank you all in the chat for being active, being a part of this, for spending your Sunday morning with me. I will see you guys as soon as I can, hopefully before Wednesday, but if not, Free Assange Vigil, Eva Bartlett, and super special, super top secret guest. Until next time, this has been Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen, and good luck to us